Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is pretty straightforward. We take complex source material, think articles, financial reports, biographies, and we boil it down into the essential insights you need.
Exactly.
And today, we've got a really fascinating and you could say high stakes case study, the life, the career, and the brand evolution of Donald Trump.
It's quite a story, isn't it? A truly singular American trajectory. We're essentially tracing how someone goes from being, a developer building things using political connections
Right.
to becoming this global media figure and then ultimately a political force that will change a lot of things.
And our focus today, just to be clear, is really on the anatomy of the brand itself. We're looking at the financial moves, the strategies, the media decisions, basically how that family name turned into this incredibly powerful global asset, almost a thing unto itself.
That's the core of it.
And for you listening, this deep dive is also, well, it's kind of a crash course in some pretty advanced business and political language, stuff you hear bandied about, maybe C1, B2 level English discussions.
Yeah, terms that come up all the time.
We're going to unpack things like junk bonds, tax abatements. We won't just define them. We'll see how they were actually used. We're dissecting how ambition, managing crises, and, frankly, media genius all combine to build this unique identity.
Precisely. Think of it as a blueprint for understanding some big concepts, like how huge corporate restructurings actually work, why a brand name can sometimes be worth more than, actual buildings.
Right, the tangible assets.
And how celebrity just fundamentally shifts the whole landscape of politics.
Yeah.
So, yeah, get ready for a pretty detailed journey through ambition, risk, and strategy.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning. To really understand the empire, you have to go back to the roots. Queens, New York, Donald John Trump, born June 14th, 1946. And he was born into a family that was already, well, pretty comfortable financially. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Financially secure is putting it mildly. His father, Fred Trump, had built a very successful business. But it was a specific kind of success.
Not Manhattan high-rises, initially.
Not at all. Fred Trump was a disciplined, very successful developer, yeah, but his world was the boroughs outside Manhattan, Queens, Brooklyn. He specialized in building affordable housing. Big projects, mostly for the middle class.
And how did he fund those? It wasn't all private capital, was it?
No, not primarily. He was very adept at using complex systems of government subsidies, state loans, federal programs for infrastructure and housing. His whole business model was built on reliability and economy. He delivered functional housing efficiently.
So stable income, government backing, predictable, but not exactly flashy.
And that's the key divergence, isn't it? The sources are pretty clear that young Donald saw that success, his father's success, as, well, limiting, a ceiling, like you said. He rejected it almost immediately.
He found it lacking glamour. Is that the sense?
Completely. He saw the family business as provincial, tied to the boroughs, not where the real action, the real spotlight was that famous quote attributed to him.
I am not going to waste my life on Brooklyn.
That's the one. And it wasn't just about geography, He was rejecting the whole ethos, the economy, the reliability. He wanted something bigger, bolder. He wanted ostentation. He wanted Manhattan.
And even before he got to Manhattan, there was a formative experience. His personality, that alpha style, as the sources call it, seems partly shaped by an early detour, right? Discipline issues as a teen.
Yeah, apparently he was quite a handful. So much so that his parents made what sounds like a pretty radical decision. At age 13, they sent him away to the New York Military Academy, NYMA.
Military academy. That's intense for a 13-year-old. How did that shape him, according to the materials?
Well, it seems critical for understanding his public persona later on.
Yeah.
NYMA wasn't just a boarding school. It was a full-on military environment, very structured. And the sources suggest it instilled in him this deep-seated appreciation for strict hierarchy, the chain of command.
Following orders, but also giving them.
Exactly. And learning how to make those quick, decisive commander's decisions, the kind you don't question or aren't supposed to.
And beyond the decision-making, what about the style?
It seems NYMA really cultivated this need or ability to project strength, an uncompromising public display of strength, that alpha-style persona. In that kind of environment, leadership often hinges on perceived power and decisiveness, maybe more than consensus building.
And he took that lesson forward.
It seems like he transposed it directly into business, projecting absolute confidence regardless of what might be going on behind the scenes. That became a huge part of his toolkit.
Okay, so after NYMA, he did a stint at Fordham University, but then made another really key educational move. He transferred to the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. That wasn't just finishing college, that was a statement, wasn't it?
Oh, a massive statement of intent. Wharton is, world-renowned as a forge of financial executives. It gave him serious, rigorous training in finance, in real estate.
So the nuts and bolts he needed?
The nuts and bolts, absolutely. But maybe just as importantly, it gave him the credential. The Wharton name opened doors. It signaled he was preparing for the high league of financial maneuvers. It put him in the room with the bankers, the developers, the power players in New York.
Right. So by 1968, he's got the Wharton degree, this specific kind of ambition, the military academy background. He joins his father's company, the Trump Organization, but his eyes are firmly set elsewhere.
Immediately. The geographical pivot was absolute. Forget Queens and Brooklyn. It had to be Manhattan.
And Manhattan in the late 60s, early 70s, that was a different beast entirely compared to his father's market.
Totally different. Fred Trump operated where things were relatively predictable, safer maybe. Manhattan back then. It was complex. Crime was high. The city itself was teetering on the edge of bankruptcy.
Doesn't sound like a great place to invest billions.
Not unless you saw opportunity where others saw decay. For a certain kind of developer, maybe a daring one, it was actually full of potential distressed assets. Buildings, properties that were undervalued, failing. Huge opportunities if you could figure out how to navigate the city's political mess and financial chaos. He seemed to grasp that the biggest risks, if managed right, could bring the biggest rewards. You just needed leverage.
Okay, so theory meets practice pretty quickly. 1974, his first really big Manhattan project, the Commodore Hotel. This seems like the template for so much that followed.
It really does. The old Commodore Hotel, right near Grand Central Station. It was basically an abandoned wreck, a hopeless ruin, as some sources put it, kind of symbolized the whole decline of mid-century New York.
A dead asset. Most developers wouldn't touch it.
Probably not. But Trump saw something else. He understood that turning this ruin into gold wasn't just about consumption. It was about the political dimension. And he seemed to realize very early on that that was maybe the more valuable asset to cultivate.
So what did he leverage? Because you needed massive capital to renovate that place, especially with New York City itself being seen as unstable by banks.
Well, the key was the city's desperation. The area around Grand Central was decaying badly. It was an eyesore, economically damaging. Trump went into these long, apparently very complex negotiations with the city authorities. Intricate and masterful negotiations is how some describe it.
What was his pitch?
He offered them a vision. A gleaming, massive new hotel, something that could be a catalyst, kickstart a revival for that whole crucial area. The city definitely needed a win there.
And the real coup, the nugget of insight here, seems to be the financial deal he struck. That says a lot about his negotiating ability.
It is everything. He managed to secure 40-year tax abatements from New York City. Just think about that.
40 years of significantly reduced taxes.
Exactly. For 4 decades, the city was essentially subsidizing his profit margin. He worked the angles, navigated the city agencies responsible for urban renewal incentives. It was an incredible achievement. The sources call it financial acrobatics for a reason.
Because it wasn't just about building plans. It was about manipulating the financial levers the city offered.
Precisely. The political leverage made a project viable that probably wouldn't have worked based on pure market economics at the time.
And he also partnered with a known hotel brand.
Yes, bringing in the Hyatt Corporation to manage it as the Grand Hyatt. That added crucial credibility. It helped attract the banking capital needed for the actual construction. So the deal wasn't just about making money, though it did that. It was his grand entrance. It cemented his place in the upper echelon of Manhattan elite.
And this project seems to have really solidified his core business philosophy.
It absolutely crystallized it. The big lesson learned, according to the sources, was this. In the world of high-stakes development, things like media buzz, knowing how to creatively use complex laws, and cultivating political influence, those are your most powerful assets.
More valuable than just hard work and saving money.
Far more valuable, in his view, than the modest hard work and the reliable economical approach his father championed. Suddenly, the name Trump started to mean boldness. It meant someone who could and would break the established rules to get extraordinary things done.
So having learned that lesson, he didn't stick with just renovating old hotels. He immediately doubled down on luxury, right? Moving completely away from his father's principles of economy.
Completely. A total pivot. He realized he wasn't just selling square footage anymore. He was selling something intangible.
Status. Lifestyle.
Exactly. He recognized that the name Trump itself needed to become the product. A self-sufficient brand, a visual shorthand for extreme wealth, power, success.
Which brings us, inevitably, to Trump Tower, 1983. If anything screams 1980s, it's that building. It was like the architectural embodiment of the decade of excess.
And the whole yuppie culture thing, yeah. Trump Tower was conceived as an ambitious display of power, utterly unapologetic luxury. The sources always mention the design. Ostentatious, almost kitsch, some would say.
Lots of brass.
Marble, tons of it. Pink marble, gleaming brass, mirrored surfaces everywhere. It was designed to overwhelm, to signal conspicuous consumption from the moment you walked in. It was the brand persona, built in glass and stone.
And did this brand-first, luxury above all strategy actually work financially?
Spectacularly at first. The apartment sold for record-breaking prices. It was the ultimate validation of his approach. He'd successfully shown he could turn bricks and mortar into pure brand equity.
The name itself was making money.
The name was monetized. It signaled to everyone that the Trump Organization wasn't just a development company anymore. It was fundamentally a branding and marketing enterprise, operating at the highest end of the market.
Okay, so he's conquered Manhattan, it seems. The brand is flying high. What's next? The ambition clearly didn't stop there. The sources point towards Atlantic City, right? The gambling business.
That seems to be the next big frontier. Trying to replicate that Manhattan success, that perceived invincibility, maybe on a different kind of national stage. Atlantic City was being positioned as the East Coast's answer to Las Vegas.
And he went in big.
Very big, very quickly. He built up a gambling empire there in short order. You had Trump Plaza, Trump's castle, and then the absolute behemoth, the Trump Taj Mahal.
The Taj Mahal. Opened in 1990. That was supposed to be the crown jewel, wasn't it? The eighth wonder of the world, I think he called it.
He did. And architecturally, it was stunning. An immense palace dripping with luxury, just like Trump Tower, but on an even grander scale. The problem wasn't the building itself. It was the financial structure underneath it. It was, well, fundamentally financially non-viable from the start, according to many analyses.
Okay, this is where we get into the really risky finance. How did he pay for this billion-dollar-plus project? You mentioned earlier that traditional banks might have been wary, even after Trump Tower's success.
They were wary because his significant debt load from other projects was already huge. Banks look at risk. They need solid collateral. The kind of money needed for the Taj Mahal, over $1 billion, just wasn't available through conventional loans at terms he found acceptable.
So he turned elsewhere. This is where junk bonds come in.
Exactly. He had to tap into that high-risk, high-yield market. This was the era of figures like Michael Milken at Drexel Burnham Lambert, who pioneered the use of these bonds for things like leveraged buyouts and, well, massive casino projects.
So for our listeners, let's just break down what junk bonds actually are. High yield, high risk.
Right. They're bonds, so essentially loans from investors. But they have a low credit rating. That means the agencies that rate debt consider them much more likely to default than, say, government bonds or bonds from a blue-chip company.
So why would anyone buy them?
Because to compensate investors for taking on that huge risk, junk bonds offer an extremely high interest rate, much, much higher than safer investments. Trump was essentially betting that the casino would generate such enormous profits, super profits, that it could easily cover not just the operating costs, but also these incredibly high interest payments demanded by the bondholders.
A massive gamble.
A colossal gamble. And the reality hit pretty hard, pretty fast. The financial structure just couldn't hold. Even with millions pouring into the casino, the sheer colossal debt burden was overwhelming.
How bad did it get?
The sources indicate that the monthly interest payments just for the Taj Mahal were approaching something like $40 million. $40 million a month just in interest. The entire Atlantic City venture started sucking in cash, becoming a financial black hole. The empire began to crumble under the weight of all that debt in the early 1990s.
Which leads us to the bankruptcies, the corporate bankruptcies. This is a really important point. Legally and for understanding the brand narrative, he personally didn't go bankrupt, right?
Absolutely crucial distinction. Donald Trump himself never filed for personal bankruptcy. His personal wealth, his homes, they were shielded by the corporate structure. The entities that declared bankruptcy were the specific companies, the subsidiaries that owned and operated the casinos.
And they used a specific part of the U.S. legal system.
Yes, they utilized Chapter 11 of the U.S. Bankruptcy Code.
Okay, so Chapter 11, that's not the end of the road for a company, is it? It's not like selling everything off.
Not at all. That's Chapter 7 liquidation, where you sell the assets and the company disappears. Chapter 11 is reorganization. It's a legal shield that allows the company to continue operating, keep the lights on, while it develops a plan to restructure its massive debts and hopefully become viable again.
So how does that work strategically? How did he use it to his advantage?
Well, think about the situation. His companies owed billions to banks, bondholders, suppliers, countless creditors. If the casinos were simply liquidated under Chapter 7, these creditors would likely get almost nothing back, maybe pennies on the dollar, after a long, messy legal fight.
So the threat of getting nothing was his leverage.
Precisely. He could essentially go to the creditors and say, look, if we liquidate, you lose almost everything. But if you agree to restructure the debt, take a massive haircut, maybe swap some debt for equity in the reorganized company, then the casinos can keep operating, and you have a chance, maybe, of recovering some of your money down the line. And critically, he argued they needed his management, his brand, to make that happen.
So the creditors were basically forced to choose the lesser of two evils.
In many cases, yes. They agreed to massive debt write-downs. They took debt for equity swaps, becoming part owners of struggling companies. But through it all, Trump managed to retain management control of the properties. And, crucially for the brand,
He kept his name on the buildings.
that was key. Trump Plaza, Trump Taj Mahal, the name stayed. So, despite going through 4 major corporate bankruptcies in the 90s and early 2000s, shedding billions in debt owed by his companies,
He spun it differently in public.
masterfully, he publicly shifted the narrative. He didn't frame it as failure, he framed it as being smart, as strategically using the country's bankruptcy laws to his advantage. He turned potential financial ruin into a story of being an unpredictable and ingenious deal-maker who knew how to play the system. And somehow, the core Trump brand, in the public imagination at least, remained remarkably steadfast, ready for its next act.
Right, so the Atlantic City ventures definitely tarnished his reputation within serious financial circles, didn't they? Accessing that kind of huge bank financing must have become much harder after multiple Chapter 11s.
Oh, undoubtedly. The well of traditional big money lending had likely dried up considerably. So the sources really paint this as a moment of necessity. He needed a radical brand reboot. If Wall Street was wary, where could he turn?
Away from finance, towards mass appeal.
Exactly. Away from bricks and mortar, maybe, and towards the most powerful engine of mass culture available, television.
And this leads to The Apprentice.
Arguably the most brilliant strategic pivot of his entire career. Around 2003, he signs a deal with NBC. The Apprentice premieres in 2004 and becomes this instant massive hit. And more than just a hit show, it functioned as an incredibly effective reputation laundering machine.
How so? How did it launder the reputation?
Well, think about it. It completely shifted the public focus. People weren't talking about the complicated, messy details of casino bankruptcies or debt restructuring anymore. Instead, every week, millions of people saw him on TV, presented as the absolute personified symbol of American success.
The ultimate billionaire boss.
The ultimate billionaire boss.
Yeah.
He played the role perfectly. The stern judge and executive. The tough, decisive, no-nonsense magnate who embodied this ideal of uncompromising capitalism.
And the show itself, the format. Contestants doing business tasks, competing for a job under his watchful eye.
Right. But the real star wasn't the contestants. It was the persona he cultivated. Decisive, authoritative, unflappable. And it all culminated in that catchphrase.
You're fired.
Became one of the biggest, powerful cultural catchphrases of the 2000s. It was everywhere. It went way beyond the show, just permeated pop culture globally. It made him not just a businessman, but a genuine primetime television star.
And this wasn't just about fame for fame's sake. There was a clear business angle to this celebrity, wasn't there? Even with the catchphrase itself.
Well, yeah. The business lesson here is the complete monetization of identity. He actually trademarked the phrase, "you're fired." And even the specific pointing gesture he used, he packaged his persona and sold it.
Wow.
And the massive success of the show, the cultural ubiquity, it immediately enabled another major strategic shift for the Trump organization's core business model. They started moving away from the risks of actually building things themselves.
This is the licensing model pivot we talked about.
Exactly. This became the dominant strategy. It was incredibly clever, really. Asset-light profitability. The Trump organization started aggressively licensing the name, the brand equity, supercharged by The Apprentice, to other developers all over the world.
So buildings in Dubai, Panama, Toronto, they weren't necessarily built or funded by Trump himself.
Often not. Developers in those locations would pay the Trump organization millions of dollars just for the right to put the Trump name on their luxury residential towers, hotels, golf courses.
What was the financial logic for the Trump org? Less risk?
Hugely less risk, much higher margins. They typically get a significant percentage upfront, maybe 10%, 20% of the projected value, plus ongoing fees, often 5% to 10% of sales or revenue, all without having to put their own capital into the massive construction risks involved in these multi-billion-dollar projects.
So the developers were buying the brand's halo effect.
Precisely. They paid for the Trump name because it signaled extreme luxury, status. It allowed them to command premium prices for their apartments or hotel rooms. The brand had effectively shifted from being primarily a real estate entity that built and managed properties
To basically a marketing and entertainment entity that sold its name.
That's a great way to put it. And the revenue from the show itself was substantial too. Sources estimate around $213 million over its 14 seasons. It was a financial windfall driven purely by the media persona.
And looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, this television success seems to have unintentionally equipped him with some critical skills for what came next.
Absolutely critical skills, and perhaps unforeseen at the time. Two things stand out. First, television gave him this incredibly powerful platform to communicate directly with millions and millions of people every week. He could bypass the traditional media gatekeepers, the journalists, the editors, who might normally filter his message or bring up uncomfortable facts about his past.
He had a direct line to the audience.
A direct line. And second, he spent years honing the art of television communication. He learned how to create vivid, memorable headlines, how to simplify complex ideas, business strategies, financial deals, down to a soundbite, down to a catchphrase.
Like you're fired.
Exactly. He mastered the language of reality TV. And it turns out, as the sources note, that the dynamics of politics, especially modern politics, share a lot with reality TV. They reward drama, conflict, and charisma.
So by the time he started seriously considering politics, he wasn't just a businessman anymore.
No. He was a television star with immense name recognition, a built-in audience, and arguably greater political leverage in terms of pure public connection than many seasoned politicians, many experienced senators. He understood the media game in a way they didn't.
So the stage was perfectly set, in a way. The businessman turned reality TV megastar decides to make the leap into politics. Spring 2015, the famous escalator ride down at Trump Tower to announce his candidacy for president.
And the initial reaction from the political world, particularly the Republican Party political establishment, was just, well, total skepticism, wasn't it? Even outright derision. They mostly saw him as a non-serious candidate. A sideshow, maybe?
But the campaign he ran was anything but conventional. It broke all the rules.
Entirely unconventional from day one. A key element was his use of social media, especially Twitter. That became his primary direct communication channel. He wasn't relying on press releases or carefully managed events nearly as much.
Raw, unfiltered messages straight from him to his followers.
Exactly. Bypassing the media filter almost entirely. And the style of those messages and his speeches, it was a direct continuation of that TV persona, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Sharp, often aggressive, deliberately non-politically correct.
A style that shocked many, but clearly connected with others.
It found incredible resonance with a specific and very motivated segment of the electorate. And then there was the slogan.
Make America Great Again, Magi.
Just a brilliantly simple, powerful, emotional appeal. It tapped directly into feelings of economic nationalism, nostalgia for a perceived better past, frustration with the status quo.
Who specifically was responding most strongly? Where did it land?
The sources consistently point to its strong appeal among the working class, particularly in the Rust Belt states, places that had seen manufacturing decline due to globalization and outsourcing. People who felt, rightly or wrongly, that they'd been left behind by both political parties.
So Magi became more than a slogan.
It became a symbol of protest, a rallying cry against the perceived elites in Washington and elsewhere. His core strategy seemed to be unifying all his opponents, Democrats, establishment Republicans, the media, into one single target, the Washington swamp. It was that simplified, good versus evil reality show conflict narrative applied to politics, and it worked.
It worked well enough for him to win the presidency in 2016, famously winning the Electoral College while losing the overall popular vote. And once in office, his approach seemed to be a direct transposition of that mogul style into governance. Let's touch on some key policy areas, fiscal policy first.
Right. The absolute centerpiece there was the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. This was a huge piece of legislation. Its main goal, its headline feature, was slashing the corporate tax rate dramatically from 35% down to 21%.
And the stated rationale for that?
The economic theory pitched was that this would stimulate reinvestment. Corporations with lower tax bills would invest more in the U.S., create more jobs, raise wages. That was the argument.
And besides the tax cuts,
a major focus on deregulation. The administration rolled back regulations across various sectors, notably in finance, aiming to ease some of the rules put in place after the 2008 crisis, and significantly in environmental protection, arguing that these rules hampered economic growth.
Okay, shifting to immigration policy. This was maybe the most visible, most symbolic promise from his campaign.
Absolutely. The defining image was the push for physical border wall construction on the U.S.-Mexico border. That, combined with implementing a strict zero-tolerance policy at the border, aimed at deterring illegal crossings. It was tangible, visual, and kept the issue constantly in the headlines, fueling political debate.
And then foreign policy. The guiding principle seemed to be encapsulated in another simple phrase.
America first. That mantra really defined the approach. It translated into a deep skepticism regarding multilateral agreements and international bodies.
Leading to concrete actions.
Yes. We saw the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accord on climate change and pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, trade agreement. His preference was clearly for direct personal negotiations between leaders. Bilateral deals over complex, multi-nation agreements. Think of the high-profile, unprecedented meetings with the North Korean leadership. That was very much his style.
And throughout all these policy initiatives, his presidency was marked by, well, intense division.
Unprecedented political polarization, really. Conflict with established institutions, the media, even within his own government at times. It was a constant feature.
And the polarization led to some historical firsts, didn't it?
It did. He became the only U.S. president in history to be impeached twice by the House of Representatives.
Yeah.
The first impeachment was for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, related to dealings with Ukraine. The second, coming after the events at the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, was for incitement of insurrection.
Though he was acquitted by the Senate in both trials.
Correct. The Senate did not vote to convict or remove him from office either time. But those two impeachments alone permanently cemented his legacy as arguably the most polarizing leader of the modern American era. It showed just how deeply his disruptive, celebrity-driven style of politics had fractured the country. Hashtag tag tag outro. So if you try to synthesize this whole incredible story we've walked through, the life of Donald Trump really stands as this essential case study. It shows how sheer personal ambition, combined with a highly developed media savvy honed on reality TV, no less, and this, frankly, remarkable willingness to leverage financial crises using tools like Chapter 11 bankruptcy. How all that can totally change a person's trajectory.
From developer to global brand to president.
Exactly. It's the story of a brand, really. A brand built on financial leverage that survived multiple near collapses through narrative control and ultimately seized political power by connecting directly with an audience, bypassing traditional structures.
And I think the ultimate point here, the synthesis, is that the brand itself, the name Trump, almost transcended the man or the business. It became an ideology, a cultural marker. His journey kind of proves that in our hyper-mediated world, a really potent personal brand can sometimes be more powerful than a traditional political party. He used celebrity to build a political movement.
And even after leaving office, amidst all the political turmoil that contested election results, he returned to managing the Trump Organization, the hotels, the golf clubs, the valuable licensed real estate deals. He clearly retains phenomenal political leverage within his party and with his base. The brand, despite everything, endures globally.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you, our listeners, to chew on. We talk a lot about the shift from, say, complex financial restructuring to simple, powerful catchphrases like, "You're fired," or MAGA. So here's the question. How much does the success of modern political branding, and you see this pattern everywhere now, not just in the U.S., how much does it depend on being able to distill really complex issues of governance, tax policy, foreign relations, whatever, down into a single, sticky, repeatable slogan?
A soundbite that cuts through the noise.
Exactly. And if that's the key to success, what's the potential long-term cost? What happens to nuanced policymaking, to effective governance that requires dealing with complexity when everything has to be simplified for maximum brand recognition and repetition? Maybe think about that simplification next time you hear a political movement built around a really catchy 3 or 4 word phrase.